Right, to continue the conversation for this fourth part of the agenda, we've heard about cultivated meat for the global market, but what about the technology around cultivated proteins? And how can we get these to scale both locally and globally? Time now to find out. Please give a very warm welcome to our next guests. First up, we have Ira van Aelen, who is the co-founder and CEO of KindEarth.tech and is the co-founder of Respect Farms from the Netherlands. A very warm welcome. Lovely to have you here. Next up, we have Mihir Prashad, who is the CEO of Umami Bioworks Singapore. A very warm welcome to Mihir. Next up, we have Helen Hai Ryan G, who is the CEO of Hai Think Tank Korea. A very warm welcome. And now rounding out our panel, please give a very warm welcome to Professor Xingmi Zhang from Zhejiang University, who's also the CEO of Microfuture Food Biotechnology China. A very warm welcome. Yet again, a fantastic lineup, the Netherlands, Singapore, Korea, and China. There you go. Oh, I'm a bit far away from you. I'm going to come over here. Wow, what an incredible presentation. I mean, there's so many questions around this. I mean, obviously from my consumer perspective, obviously as well. I don't know how many sort of consumers. I'm sure we've got a lot of experts and academia in the crowd. But I've got so many questions, but let's start off with the ones I have. Of course, we're going to throw out to our audience, so please do get some good questions going. Ira, let's start off with you. What made you decide to go into this market, and how do you think, I mean, we've obviously seen there's going to be so much progress, there's a lot of investment, there's a lot of excitement around this sector right now. So how do you feel it's going to go forward, and why did you get into it?
I have some slides. I hope the people in the back can help me out with those slides and explain why I'm here and why I'm doing what I'm doing. This is my dad. My dad is Willem van Aelen, and he started working on the idea of cultivated meat already in 1948. But at that time, that was not possible. But with the stem cell research, he started working on it again in 1980. And his idea was simple, and it was perfectly explained what cultivated meat is by our former speaker. And it's just to make cells, grow it into meat instead of growing whole animals. What he achieved was the first proof of concept already in 1993. He wrote the first patents on cultivated meat in 1999, and the first ever government grant given by the Netherlands government, he procured together with 3 universities and created a whole team. And in that team was Mark Post and Peter Verstraeten, who actually created that first hamburger. If you look at the timeline and if you look at my age, I was a teenager when that picture was taken. And one of the things you do know about your parents, you think they're crazy. Well, believe me, when I was 14 and my father started this work, I was quite sure that my father was the craziest person in the whole world. And explaining that to parents of your friends was really hard. But somehow, listening to the man and being together with him and his amazing friends and people he worked with, I couldn't stay away from this field, which is so important. I have a child, and being able to now have my child eat cultivated meat in Singapore and also in the US is one of the reasons why I'm here, because I'm one of the fortunate people that has been eating cultivated meat. The amazing taste, the amazing properties, that's why I'm here. There's a lot that I do that I will not talk about. I will not talk about cultivated meat or about KindEarth.tech. I will not talk about the 60 million that we got in the Netherlands to work on cultivated meat and precision fermentation, but I will tell you a secret. That first proof of concept and that first government grant came to a conclusion. And Patrick, I'm happy to tell you that one of the highlights that came out in 2008 was that we could actually do cultivated meat as an additional business model for farmers by feeding them algae as one of the biomasses, whether it's for sugar or for protein, to cells. So algae will play a role in cultivated meat if it's up to me. But for me, it's also important to incorporate farmers in this new era of food. Not tomorrow, not the day after tomorrow, but in the near future, yes. And to me, it is extremely sad that right now, politics in Europe, but also politics all over the world, are leading farmers to believe that this is an industry that was designed against them instead of for them. Because I was there, and anyone in this room tell the rest of the world that this was designed as an additional business model for and with farmers. Here you can see the benefits. It's a small slide. Let's not forget that farming is one of the largest markets in the world. So if you want to be here to make money, look at the numbers and please be part of that market in the future. And I come from the Netherlands, and farmers are buying milking robots like crazy. It's one of our leading export products from the Netherlands. We still export animal agriculture on a daily basis all over the world, and I hope not to Africa. So please do something else in Africa. This is what we do, and it's not been talked about very much, and that is design. Make sure for a new industry with so much potential that you have your design criteria in order. So if we do that, I think that cultivated meat will be on farms, will be in factories, and will be in the UAE, hopefully, because you have an enormous potential here, and also probably as a home appliance. And on behalf of my father, thank you for having me here. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak about something that for me is now a family business.
Brilliant. What an amazing insight. And I love that it's been an inspiration from your father as well, and it's come down the sort of generation. I think that's really great. Right, over to Mahir very quickly. You co-founded a company, Umami Bioworks, which is one of the first in the world, in fact, to deal with cultivated fish. So how does your technology differ from cultured meat from a scientific point of view? What are those differences technology-wise?
Sure. So I think the biggest differences are that fish and the animals we generally farm on land are biologically separated by a few 100 million years. And what that means is that some of the proteins, the way that their basic cells and the animals function are not exactly the same. And I think that's the fundamental core difference, is that when you grow the cell, just as when you grow the animal, you couldn't put a fish in a barn with chickens and expect that the fish would survive. And so we have to take that level of recognizing these are different animals and they come from different environments, translates to what the cells need to grow. And I can give a couple of examples. One of the most obvious is that pretty much everything we farm is able to maintain its temperature as a bird or a pig or cow. But fish tend to basically match their temperature to the ocean water they live in. So the temperature range that the cells can live in tends to be quite big. The range where they thrive is often very narrow. And this looks quite different from when you grow cow cells. You have a number that's been researched for the past 30 years. We know exactly what temperature to grow them at. The same is true, and probably much more complex, that fish and other aquatic organisms live in ocean water. And ocean water has a complete salt profile, meaning it's not just sodium chloride. There's selenium, there's a bunch of other trace metals. Everything you can imagine, small amounts of metals and other ions are in ocean water at small concentrations. It may sound like this doesn't matter at all. But if you look at something like a shrimp, for example, they actually use copper to move oxygen. We all use iron. Animal culture media that is available in the market today has iron salt in it made from mammalian cells. It doesn't have copper in it because copper is toxic to mammalian cells. So there's a lot of these kinds of optimizations where you have to go back to the basic biology and think about how to optimize the cell culture media and the growth conditions to match. And I think one of the big challenges is that there's tons of research on humans and the animals we use to make human disease research possible. So mice, monkeys, all sorts of other small animals in that chain have pretty good R&D that translates reasonably well to pig and cow cell culture. We don't have nearly a fraction of that budget going into fish research, let alone fish cell culture research. So we're starting from a much, much lower base. The benefit we have is that the products tend to cost more on average if you buy fish versus if you're buying chicken. So we have to start with a longer way to go to get to an end result. But when we do, we can get to a commercially viable price point at a more expensive product.
Thank you so much. Professor Jingming, I want to go to you next, because I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the challenges and the complexities around this. Because obviously, as we heard, there's so many benefits. But I suppose mindset and a consumer mindset and that end consumer, I presume, is going to be the biggest challenge. But very cleverly, as we saw, 2023, they rolled the first sort of cultivated meat out to a very high-end luxury restaurant, which is, as I mentioned, is like a great way to do it. So you hit that luxury target market first, because luxury is always about, being different. So what are the challenges in your mind, as well as the technology challenges as well?
Thank you. It's an honor to have this opportunity to fly 14 hours from China to here. And after, listen to several presenters, I think I worth the trip. And for the cultivated meat, I think there's several obstacles, hurdles every investor or the scientist, entrepreneur has talked about that there's a policy, there's a different customer acceptance. Besides that, as I'm do my most of the time job in Zhejiang University in China, so I more care about the technical hurdles. For the first one is the cost. So we developed the first, cultivated meat 10 years ago. Through these 10 years, there's a substantial, the cost decrement through that. However, we still facing three cost obstacles. First one is the media. The media, I mean, is that currently we are using the pharmaceutical grade medium components, which is very expensive. And the second one is that without a full utilization of the media, that means if you have thousands of liters of the bioreactor, you have tons of waste per day. And that is the, give another burden to the environment. The second one is the bioreactor we are using currently is derived from the biopharmaceutical industry, which means we have a difficult translation between the low cell density from the biopharmaceutical one to the high density of the cultivated meat, which means 100 times cell density, which means that there's quite a gap between the commercialized cultivated meat bioreactor versus the biopharmaceutical, because we are actually making the meat, and it's a huge consumption rate. The last one is the labor. As we all know, in China, when we talk about the salary, the average salary of the industry, the food science salary, the food company has a not very high salary compared to the biopharmaceutical one. However, for the cultivated meat company, most of the scientists, engineers are coming from the biopharmaceutical industry, which means the salary, the labor cost is quite high. The second aspect I want to talk about is the investor opinion on how to invest the cultivated meat industry. I think most of the investors, do not want to try and error for very first time that you do not have a very mature technology. You cannot scale up very fast, and which means the company will not have the revenue in a short future. However, based on this point, the third hurdles is that the principles of the bioprocess of the cultivated meat versus the biopharmaceutical one is quite different. we have different cell density requirement. We have different medium recycle strategies, which means there's a huge gap. To deal with that, I think the first step we should do is that how to deal with the more expensive one, which is the media. The media cost is around 60 to 80% of the total price of the cultivated meat, which means if you can lower the cost of the media, you can lower cost of the cultivated meat, no matter the fish or the beef or the pork or the chicken. To do that, what we do is that we trying to recycling the medium efficiently. Especially, I talked several times on high density cultivation. That means you have very high inhibitors generated in a short time, which is back to inhibit the cell growth. If you can selectivity to absorb the inhibitors from the medium, which means you can use the medium for a longer time and you supplement it with the substances. And second one is that how we can deal with the waste. We still have the waste generated from medium. So from my point of view is that we use the microalgae to use the waste. And the waste can transformation to the microalgae to grows very good. And we can adapt the microalgae to, the yellow color, the red color, and the color of the microalgae itself can be a substrate for a bland cultivated meat substrate. That's my answer.
Very interesting. Helen, very quickly over to you before we move over to our audience. For audience questions, please do get some good ones ready. Now, Helen, you represent a UA creative think tank. So tell us a little bit more about how organizations like yourselves contribute to the development of new disruptive sectors such as this.
Hello, everyone. My name is Helen Ji from South Korea. And I also flew over 11 hours here. So thanks for having me today at this amazing event. Actually, to go in the story, I want to introduce myself a little bit so you can have a better understanding, because the three other panels are 1,000 times more professional and then experts for cultivated meat area. But my company is a boutique size of consulting agency, and then we help plant-based company and then cultivated food, also other alternative food to be successful in the market. So we touch it everything from consumer side, governmental side, and then in between industry, and then try to fill the gaps which each of the layers can really figure it out. So we are all around the player, but we have a great connection with each of the sectors, governmental side, university side, industrial side, consumer side. So my story is very private. For me, I can give more story about the consumer side because I'm a passionate business activist who truly believes in the power of people, and the food choices can change our world kinder, safer, healthier, and sustainable. Because of that, I'm the future consumer of cultivated meat, including any other alternative food. So my passion is there, so I will do everything to reduce and then the harmness to animals or humans or planet as well. So first of all, I want to say consumer is always number one important thing we should keep it in our mind. Regarding to cultivated meat, recently last year, APEC SCA, so Society for Cellular Agriculture. They conducted the survey in Korea over 1,100 people, and then over 90.8% of consumers are willing to intake cultivated meat or seafood over, seafood. And then over 18% people also answered they prefer cultivated food over plant-based. So I was quite shocking.
Yeah, wow.
Because in Korea, around me, in food sector, or in general, like, culinary industry or F&B industry and so on, they hear lots of things from me over 10 years because I switched my diet choices, 11 years ago. But they never said they will try it, they will use it. But the survey said actually the consumer are very curious about it. But after curiosity, what actually consumer expect cultivated food as a food itself? We are very afraid. We are still very confused. As maybe China is the same or Japan is the same. Asia itself, we don't feel like we are in the crisis of a food system yet because we have so many food resources around us. Many of mountain vegetables, mushrooms, and then this kind of whole food ingredients are everywhere. But in the end of the day, of course, we should go to this direction for sure. Not today, not tomorrow, 10 years later, 20 years later, for our generation now, and then for the next generation anyway. So the survey result really shows me the hope and the possibility that it can win in the actual consumer market. And then the market can grow in the nearest future. We expect in 2025, the first Korean company may do the commercialized cultivated meat product after getting the approval of the governmental side of regulation. So, yeah.
So interesting. And as you mentioned, that sort of next generation, because obviously this isn't going to come about, as you mentioned, it's going to take a bit of time, but it's perfect timing for that next generation because they care about nutrition and they care about the environment, which is something, relatively new after COVID and all sorts of things. There's a lot more awareness around it. Right, over to our audience. Yes. Sergey, why don't you start us off? If we could just grab a microphone. Yes. Sergey, why don't you introduce yourself again to us, just in case anyone missed this morning.
Sergey Ivanov. I'm one of the speakers of the conference. My question to Ira. First of all, thank you so much for your sharing. It's so personal story, so touching. Have you read this article? So the very optimistic panel, I would say. Agreed. Have you read the article of the Mr. Joe Fassler in New York Times?
Which one?
Is anybody read it? The name of the article, The Revolution That Died on Its Way to Dinner. It's about cultivated meat. So what do you think about it? What about his arguments, about his logic? And the main question, so you said not tomorrow, not the day after tomorrow, but in the future, this technology will help farmers. How?
I think, I'm on. Let's not forget that farmers produce our food today in a decentralized way. And then we come up with great ideas in bioreactors and in labs and at universities, and we start working there. And what we do, we work with machinery that is not designed for food at all. It's actually designed for pharma. So there's even at the beginning of the ideas, there's a huge gap between the actual production of food and the idea. And I think we need to bridge that gap with good design and business models for farmers and decentralized business models for farmers. I don't think it is a good idea that everyone lives in cities. I think rural areas should be part of our design. And if we design appropriately, and not with a concept of just focusing on a factory, we will be able to make locally produced cultivated food or precision fermentation, maybe in a combination. Let's not forget algae and mycelia. It's not just one solution, it's a combination of solutions that we have to design right now also for decentralized production. And whether that is very small or larger scale, we have to figure it out. But right now, we're not figuring it out in the right way. And that is actually why Respect Farms right now is not a cultivated meat company, but it is actually a research project to figure out how could this work. But we do know what farmers would like. And let's not forget, farming is not set in stone. It has changed the last 70 years immensely. If they have adapted to new ways of producing, it is incredible. And farmer, that's a lot of different people in this world. So not all farmers will like to do this. But there's a huge capacity of farmers. And even EU research has said that by 2040, 5% of farmers could be self-farmers. And in what kind of capacity, I'm figuring it out. But it is one of the questions I think we need to ask ourselves.
Great question and a great answer. Any further comments?
I was going to suggest one thing, which I think is it's easy and often, in hindsight, quite funny to look at a number of things that we were told will not exist or cannot exist. I think in the New York Times, since we're talking about a New York Times article, there was an op-ed talking about how long it would take for us to create a working airplane. And on that time frame, they were wrong by about 20 or 30 years. Less than a month after the op-ed came out, the Wright brothers took off in North Carolina. And on the 30 to 40 year time frame that op-ed about humans not getting to flight very soon, we had turbine engines, and 10 years after that, we had people on the moon. So I think people dramatically underestimate what can happen in a decade, and they dramatically overestimate what will happen in the next 12 months. It's just the way human minds aren't wired for exponential growth. Mm-hmm. We think in linear terms. And that's a big challenge for us talking about technologies that will grow exponentially, as all technologies do. There's an S-curve. So trying to predict when things will take off, when that happens very, very suddenly, is quite difficult.
Thank you so much. Further comments.
I want to add one thing. By industry changes, our jobs has been changing. So I believe that the farmers should change their business model soon. And then the collaborating working is really works for those people not to lose their existing jobs. So I think it is quite positive to work together with the farmers.
Yeah, it's a very interesting position because obviously it's a big topic and people are worried about it. So marrying the two industries together is the way forward, so it seems.
And what I would also like to add is that currently that industry is extremely successful. Not fair, but it is a very successful value chain. And it is very old-fashioned way of thinking, okay, let's do away with what is there and build something extremely new. The fastest way to success is reusing what is good and replacing what we can do better. And that is, let's take out that animal and put in a bioreactor. And whether that is for cultivated meat, for precision fermentation, or whatever novel system, but let's do that. And let's create additional business models.
Thank you so much. 6 minutes left. 2 more questions, I think. This lady in the front here, please. And then we'll have one more. Do tell us who you are or where you're from. And hopefully a generic question for our panel, but feel free to ask whatever you like.
Thank you so much. This is Ayça Karozan. I'm from Givaudan. My question is the panelists. We learn a lot for the cultivated meat today. So it is clear about the sustainability point of view for the animal welfare. But how about the health point of view, the digestion? So one of the reasons consumers prefer plant-based, because it is healthier, especially for the digestion point of view. So with the cultivated meat, we will be having the exact meat experience, but how about the digestion? So how about the perception for the consumers when they are preferring the alternative proteins?
I think it's a bit of
Good
a
question.
misnomer.
Who would like to go first?
I would love to, but you can go.
I was going to say, I think it's a misnomer in general to say plant-based is like this and meat is like this. There are healthy and unhealthy ways to prepare most foods. And you could make very unhealthy cultivated if you wanted to, right? If we talk about making Wagyu, Wagyu has pretty high fat content, but it's delicious. But we could make food in a very controlled environment, which has benefits with regard to avoidance of pesticides, avoidance of microbiological contaminants, antibiotics, and things like heavy metals in the case of seafood, where we can avoid these things because we have a controlled environment. But that's more, fermentation will have those same benefits. It's not just a cultivated potential benefit, but we could also make very, very unhealthy plant-based and very unhealthy cultivated if the goal is flavor and not nutrition, which in some cases maybe it is.
Yeah, I completely agree with what Mihir is saying here. And it is, again, a design question. And if we, with the current knowledge about food and nutrition and nutritional values, know what is good for us, why not design that kind of food with amazing ingredients? Cultivated meat can be a whole cut, which is actually quite difficult at this point, but it can be an amazing ingredient. And together with precision fermentation ingredients, we can design amazing foods. And what do we know about food? Well, I don't want to go back 100 years, because the food we eat today is way more delicious than 100 years ago. Maybe we have a problem, maybe we have too much of this and that in it, but we can design better foods. And one of my favorites is when Mihir does his job very well, and also Mozambique does a good job, I will have a surf and turf with an amazing broccoli sauce. That is what I hope for the future. And that is one of those new products that I hope will come out.
Any further comments?
I think I want to add a point that I think, for example, the seafood, if we do the in-room culture of a fish in the water, there should be some contaminants. But if you have the fish in the seawater has some heavy metals. If you want to eat the oysters, there's still some heavy metals inside. However, if you do the cultivated meat, for example, the seafood, you are producing it in a confined, well-defined cultivation media, which means you do not have that potential hazardous. Yeah.
Very well said. No potential hazards, but still it's getting the public to change the mindset, isn't it? That's still the big one, anyway, for me, and I'm sure a lot of other people. But are there any other questions? We have time for one more question, ladies and gentlemen. What's it going to be? Don't be shy. Final question, and then we'll break for our networking coffee break afterwards. Any further questions? If not, as we have a minute left, it'd be quite nice to get your final key takeaways on this sector. Maybe just a 1 minute, 1 sentence wrap up in terms of why you think this sector is going to sort of gain so much traction, and any advice for anyone here that's looking to maybe get into the industry. Please do start us off, and you've got a minute, a sentence each.
I want to emphasize the importance of government investments. I'm lucky to be in the Netherlands now, where for the next 8 years, with a total plan of 85 million, we can do work, and amazing results will come out of that work. Only counting in this industry on venture capitalists is not the way to go. So please, governments, step up and make sure that universities go to work.
Very well said. Mihir, over to you.
I think I'll echo that, but I'll add incumbent food companies to the important value chain players to make this successful. There are trillions of dollars of embedded capital in our food system today, and it's silly for startups to say we're going to reinvent trillions of dollars of capital overnight. We need to figure out how we can enable a more sustainable and just transition within the food system, working with these players.
Very well said. Helen, over to you.
I have a question for everybody here. After listening all the data, knowledges, motivation, fund, governmental support, whatever it is, who will change your diet choice or food choice from today? Can you raise your hand? Nobody?
I think we have one.
Okay, so I want you to think about it today or tomorrow, the day after tomorrow.
And final comments.
Okay. I think cellular agriculture is the future. I starting to know this kind of science when I was PhD in Purdue University. To study it from spaceship, from Earth to the Mars, we should have the protein. And right now, what I'm conducting the research is that how about our daily consumption? Can we use the cultured meat as our daily meat protein supplement? I think this is very exciting. Thank you.
A lot of food for thought, excuse the pun. Brilliant session. Really, really appreciate all your insights, and thank you for flying all over the world to be with us here today. Very impressed indeed. Any further questions, you can speak to any of our panelists in the networking break. Thank you so much. Thank you.